I'm Evelyn. Looking forward to a pleasant partnership.
Evelyn's finally released as our first limited fire attacker, and my oh my does she look good. She plays good too, doing some absurd damage and, on the surface, being surprisingly easy to pick up. But as we've seen with Harumasa and Astra before, simple kits beguile complex characters. It seems like many have been comparing her to Miyabi, saying she's a very strong damage dealer but not quite as strong. But to that I say, you are not chain attacking enough. You might be looking at that and thinking, how in the world am I getting 2 tether points and 1 ultimate with no Burning Embers gauge being used? How can I swap back to Astra without any quick assist prompts getting in the way? Well, you may be hearing me now and haven't got a clue on what I'm talking about. What are tether points? What's Burning Ember gauge? Just what is even happening in those rotations? We'll cover all of these and much more in this guide. So let's first break down Evelyn's kit and how she works and go through a few key concepts you need to know to play her well. We can then cover the techs that are available to her and how to use them. Then go through some drive disc and engine recommendations and put everything together into more of her combos and rotations. This is my longest and most comprehensive guide yet, so you better buckle up because we're going to get down to the detail. Evelyn's shtick is use a lot of chain attacks, and the game makes this easy to do. By literally just holding down the special button, you can build up gauge, chain attack, build up points, then chain again. Just one button. Very simple. And that's because, at a glance, Evelyn is a simple character. The way her mechanic works is that whenever you attack an enemy, you build up gauge, called Burning Embers. The gauge is made up of 16 stacks, and almost every attack you do will build up embers. Basic attacks, specials, EX specials, dash attacks, dodge counters, quick assists, and assist follow-ups. They all build gauge. The only things that don't are chain attacks, ultimates, and defensive assists. Although, as we've just covered, the follow-up to the defensive assist does. Actually, there's one more attack that doesn't build up embers, and that's Evelyn's enhanced basic attack, Garrote. You can only use this attack when you have 8 stacks or more in Burning Embers, so 50% of the gauge, by holding down either basic attack or special. Although keep in mind, if you hold special, it will prioritize using the skill before the enhanced basic attack. If you have 16 stacks, or 100% of the gauge, you can use Garrote's second form after the first, with the second use being a little stronger. Whenever you use this enhanced basic attack, you gain a burning tether point. Each point by itself does nothing. But when you have 3 points, you can hold a basic attack or special button, and instead of using Garrote, you perform a chain attack. That will, however, consume all of your points, so you're back to 0. And so, the cycle begins again. Pretty straightforward. Build gauge as you fight, convert gauge to points with your enhanced basic attack, then chain attack when your points are full. But enhanced basic attacks aren't the only way of getting points. You have noticed that sometimes Evelyn is not wearing her jacket. When she uses her ultimate, she'll take off her jacket, deal a bunch of damage, and enter the Dance of Awakened Fire state. She even has a different animation for ultimates after the first. This is more than just for looks though. If you pay attention to her points, you see that she has gained a point after using her ultimate. Every ultimate activation, whether it's the one with a jacket on or off, will always give you one burning tether point. But it doesn't end there. When in the Dance of Awakened Fire state, Evelyn cannot go below 1 tether point. This means that, in practice, after the first ultimate, you only need 2 tether points to use a chain attack, as there will always be a baseline of 1. Which does add some nuance to how she plays. Your first sun rotation will differ from follow-up ones, because you're effectively needing 1 extra tether point for every chain. So whether Evelyn has her jacket on or off will influence how many chains you can fit in a stun period, as well as how your general rotation operates. But regardless of what mode Evelyn's on, one thing's certain. You want to go into every stun with as many points and as much gauge as possible. This is where understanding her core passive and special attacks gets very handy. And with how long TECHS has been in some characters' core passives as of late, Evelyn's is a breath of fresh air. A 25% increase to crit rate while under Binding Seal, which lingers for up to 10 seconds after exiting. Plus, an automatic special attack when swapping out, if under Binding Seal. But this doesn't tell us much, nor does it help us build gauge. Just what even is Binding Seal? Well, her core passive doesn't have much text because it's all in her skills, and the effects of her passive are directly tied to her special and the rest of her kit. The Binding Seal state is seen when Evelyn has a wire connecting her and an enemy. It has no fixed time limit and it remains even if you're hit. Although it will break if you move too far away from the enemy. It also has no relation to who your current target is. You can bind an enemy and attack a completely different one. But certain attacks will reapply the bind, overriding any others you have in place. The easiest way to apply the Binding Seal is with Evelyn's special. If no enemies are bound, then she'll tag one and jump in for an attack. It has a huge range too, making it a great gap closer. With enemies now being bound, using your special again will activate a follow-up, grouping up enemies and detonating the Binding Seal. The grouping in particular is really useful, especially in shield defense. Just be mindful that, although you're free to attack targets that aren't bound, detonating it will always be done to the bound enemy. If you swap out of Evelyn, her core passive kicks in, and you don't even need to cast it yourself. The real benefit of her special though, is that it can help you build gauge quickly. If you time your special follow-up to activate just as the enemy is about to hit you, you counter and gain a huge bonus to your Burning Embers gauge in addition to the build-up you get just by using the special. The bonus you gain is 4 stacks, so around 25% of the gauge, and is the same for both standard special and EX special. But of course, EX special's build-up after the bonus is a lot higher. Without the counter, it'll build up half your gauge by itself. If you do get the counter off, then with just one skill, you've built 3/4 of your gauge. This means that against aggressive enemies, you can build up your resources incredibly fast, having full points and gauge ready in no time. There are a few important caveats though. If you do trigger the counter, you still get a perfect dodge decibel bonus from it. Depending on the enemy, you'll get an interrupt decibel bonus too, making it even better than regular perfect dodges. Since you get so much gauge for countering with Evelyn's special, you really don't want to be using regular dodge counters if you can help it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work well with Woodpecker Electro, as the follow-up attack is still classified as a special, not a dodge counter. At base, Trial Evelyn has a 192 bonus attack from Cannon Rotor. She retains the same value when countering with special, but gains extra attack from EX special. This proves that the special counter is not considered a dodge counter for the Woodpecker buff. And when using special via Evelyn's core passive, when she automatically uses it on swap out, the counter bonus will not trigger. Not only that, you don't even get the 1 stack for your gauge that you would otherwise if using the special on field. But even if you want every dodge to be a special counter, you may have found it a little clunky in practice. Sometimes you get the counter off, other times you're sure you pressed the button at the right time, but it doesn't work out. The reason for that is because only the special and EX special follow-ups can counter, not the raw special itself. In fact, even if you have enough meter for an EX special, the game won't even let you use it until there's a bound enemy. It won't consume your energy, but it won't give you a counter either. So the reason it may feel clunky is because you're detonating the Binding Seal when you use a special follow-up, or EX special to counter. With the binds gone, any special use is just reapplying the binds, and not countering. There's an easy way around that though, which is by interrupting the detonation of the binds. If you time a basic attack to be used just before the detonation, Evelyn skips straight into an upgraded form of her third basic attack, dealing fire damage instead of physical. This works with EX specials and regular specials. This is really handy. No detonations means no need to reapply the binding seal. You can counter over and over, filling up your gauge. And since you get to skip to an upgraded third basic attack string, you can build up even faster, as basics 4 and 5 will give more gauge gain than basics 1 through to 3. You can keep looping it at the end of every string for a never-ending combo. If you've got enough gauge, then you can skip the third basic and go straight to an enhanced basic attack, or even straight to a chain attack. Considering that the detonation itself doesn't build up any burning ember gauge, doesn't let you skip attack strings, and even does less damage than the upgraded basic 3 from cancelling, you shouldn't ever want to let it happen. But even if you don't mess up and drop the binds, just swapping out of Evelyn means that you need to reapply it after swapping back in. You might think this means using special, then going into the basic string. But if you time a dodge cancel just as the binds connect, you can cancel the animation for the kick. You can then immediately use a special follow-up to go straight to the upgraded basic 3. Do it fast enough and you may not even notice a dash. You might not even need to rely on special dodge cancelling though, as quick assists will bind the enemy. So will assist follow-ups. And chain attacks. And ultimates. And the final hit of Evelyn's basic attack string. And even just standard dodge counters. So if you're properly cancelling your detonations, you don't really ever have to worry about dropping your binds. And even if you do, like by swapping out, there's many ways of getting it back easily. Although keep in mind that Evelyn's enhanced basic attacks don't reapply the binds. And in some cases, you may still want to use a regular special to gap close quickly. But there's one thing I haven't touched on yet, and that's Modi's special counters. We've gone over the fact that special countering gives us 4 stacks, or 25% of the gauge. We've also learned that special is dodge cancelable. So if we mix these together, why not dodge cancel out of the special counter to get multiple counter bonuses at once? Since release, Zenless has had a tech where you can dodge counter and parry at the same time, as the window to trigger these moves is quite generous. You can apply the same concept to Evelyn's counter. I first came across this on a video by Zhao on Bili, which I've linked in the description. By using special, then dodging, you are interrupting your special cast with a dodge. This is the same concept as a regular special dodge cancelling for the binds. And just like the regular special dodge cancelling, you can follow up with a special again right after. So you interrupt the dodge of a special. And since special is dodge cancelable, then you can dodge again as you get 2 dodge uses before it goes on cooldown. This means that you can get your burning embers to 3/4 full in one attack. Just keep in mind that the longer the enemy attack hitbox lingers, the easier it is to do. With very fast attacks, you may, at best, be able to get 2 dodges. It also does seem to cause other weird interactions, like making the binding seal invisible. But if you can put it to practice in an actual fight, the benefits are massive. With all this, you should now have a pretty good idea of how Evelyn works and how to best set yourself up before the stun period. So let's move on and start talking about the burst. Evelyn's chain attacks, if activated via tether points, behave differently from her standard chain attacks. Unlike normal chain attacks, which interrupt pretty much any enemy action, you don't get that from tether point chains, at least not until Mindscape 2. But there is one key advantage it has over standard chains. You can swap out of them at any time. Why wait to reapply Nicole's debuff when you can use both Evelyn's chain and Nicole's EX at the same time? You can swap to Astra and Ultimate, so you can do back-to-back chains with no delay. Or better yet, trigger a regular chain at the same time that Evelyn finishes hers. Unfortunately, you can't abuse a swap gimmick during regular chains. Nor can you do it off chain attacks triggered by Astra's Ultimate. And this can be a bit of a problem. Whenever you hit a stunned enemy with a heavy attack, you will trigger a chain prompt. But if you toggle on the manual chain attack option, you can stop the chain prompt from happening for as long as you hold down either the special button or the basic attack button. You can get an enemy into the stun state and go through the whole stun duration without a single chain. Sadly, it works on pretty much everything except chain attacks and ultimates. So if you land a chain attack while an enemy is stunned, even those from Evelyn's tether points, you will be forced to trigger another chain. For a character like Harumasa, manual chain attacks being toggled means he can choose when to swap to another character in the rotation. In case you haven't watched my guide, let's just say it's a huge benefit for long and complex rotations. But Evelyn doesn't get that luxury. You don't want Evelyn to be triggering chains, you want her to be doing them. With this in mind, working around double chaining becomes pretty important. It's a concept where, by sacrificing one of your chain attacks, you can get the same character chain attack twice. No Evelyn or Astra mechanics involved. Let's first break down how chain attacks actually work. When first stunned, enemies will have their stun bar disco into a rainbow. After you perform a set number of chain attacks, the bar will turn grey, upon which you can chain attack no longer. Different enemies have different chain attack counts. Regular enemies have 1, elites have 2, and bosses have 3. Whenever you trigger a chain attack, you're using up a count. No matter whether you pick a character or cancel it, a count has been deducted from your total. So, as an example, elites have 2 chain counts. I can chain attack with one character, then another before the bar turns grey. But if I chain attack once and cancel, the bar still goes grey. Even though elites have 2 counts, the count is used up at the point in which the chain attack is triggered. So cancelling it is no different than just outright using a character's chain. Then why ever cancel? This seems wasteful, no? Usually you skip chains because some characters just take too long, like Sokaku. But even more important than that is that once you initiate a chain string, you are only allowed to use one chain attack per character. So if I proc a chain attack of Lighter, then use Evelyn's chain, that's 1 count down. If I go to Astra, that's a 2nd. My 3rd count, though, can only ever be used on the remaining character, Lighter, and not on Evelyn or Astra. If you cancel a chain attack, though, you reset this limit. And you can make use of this to double chain attack. Trigger a chain with Lighter and use Evelyn's chain. That's 1 out of 3 counts down. Unlike her normal one, you can't swap out of it. That's fine though, as you cancel right after. 2 out of 3 counts down. But as you still have 1 more chain count, just swap to Lighter and trigger it again. This is now a different chain string from the first that you cancelled, which means you can pick Evelyn 1 more time. So you do give up being able to chain attack 3 times, once per character. But for that trade-off, you give a single character, in our case Evelyn, the ability to chain twice. With this knowledge, and the understanding that you can cancel out of Evelyn's tether point chains, the combos from the start should make a little more sense. You open with Evelyn's tether point chain, but instead of sitting on her and letting it trigger a chain attack, swap to Lighter halfway through so that he can trigger it instead. Next, use chain with Evelyn and then cancel, only to swap to Lighter again for another chain trigger, which will go to Evelyn once more. A single tether point chain plus double chains from the stuns, and you're already at 3, having just barely begun the stun period. But with how long these chains take, you might struggle to fit too many of them in one stun, especially after you spend your resources and need to build up gauge and points again. This means some chains won't fully land during the stun period. But if you do want to fit all your chains within the stun period, that means you need to save every single second. And a little oddity with Evelyn's enhanced basics can help us with that. When you need to squeeze out every last frame, the time that it takes for Evelyn's enhanced basic attacks to generate tether points is way too long. Here's the thing though. The description never says you need to land the skill, just use it. Indeed, even if you miss the attack completely, you still get a point. But what happens if you interrupt the attack altogether? You still get a point. From the first frame that the attack is used, you're already guaranteed to get a tether point. So whether you're timing a near frame perfect ultimate after starting the skill, or triggering a chain attack before Evelyn's done with her enhanced basic, it all gives you points. But would you believe me if I said you could gain points without spending any gauge? This is the tech that lets you do crazy combos, like 7 chains in 1 stun with the first ultimate. And it can make playing Evelyn without Astra's ultimate, or without Astra period, a whole lot comfier. We've already established that you can do near frame perfect cancels to still get points. But if we upgrade that to frame perfect, then you not only get points, but you don't even need to spend your gauge. It's not quite frame perfect though. In fact, it's quite lenient. If you can activate Evelyn's ultimate within 5 frames of the enhanced basic being used, you interrupt the enhanced basic before it has had the chance to use up your burning embers gauge. Remember, you just need to use the attack, not land it. Since the gauge isn't consumed at the moment in which the attack begins, but a little later, you're guaranteed to get a point even if you interrupt the animation. When you work your rotations around this tech, you unlock brand new routes that weren't possible before. It's especially important for team compositions that don't use Astra, where being efficient with gauge is critical. And it saves you precious time needed for the most optimal combos. But better than saving time is gaining time. Team compositions can help us here. Lighter in particular is a huge benefit to Evelyn, because the collapse effect he applies extends the stun duration by 3 seconds. Just one of Evelyn's chain attacks is almost 2.5 seconds long by itself. So having that extra time almost guarantees the ability to fit an additional chain. If you have Lighter at M1 or above, it takes it up to 5 seconds, unlocking even more rotations in the stun period. Another key teammate for Evelyn is Astra, as she can give more chain attacks with her ultimate. No need to spend your gauge or tether points, meaning you don't need to waste time building resources back up during the stun period. In my Astra guide, I highlight how, if you can avoid using heavy attacks, you can cause the quick assist prompt to drop. This lets you swap back to Astra and get 2 chains on one character for only a single Astra ultimate. There's one tech I didn't cover in my guide that makes this even easier. I first came across this in a video by Bobo Otter on Bili, which I've linked in the description. The problem with Astra is that you need to work your rotations around her quick assist prompt cooldown. But what if you could stop the quick assist prompt from happening altogether? If Astra isn't in the idyllic cadenza state, she won't bring up quick assist prompts, be it with regular attacks or heavy attacks. By using a hold basic attack, or even just hold dodge, you can exit the state. If you do this fast enough after an ultimate, you exit the state while the quick assist prompt is still up. That lets you quick assist to Evelyn for a chain attack, then swap back to Astra during Evelyn's next chain animation. And since Astra both puts herself back in idyllic cadenza and triggers a quick assist when being swapped to, you can go right back to Evelyn for a second chain attack. And if you're worried that exiting the idyllic cadenza state will remove all of Astra's buffs, rest assured that isn't the case. The buffs last for anywhere between 20 to 30 seconds regardless of Astra's status. If you pair that with double chaining off of stuns, then pretty much any character in the game can quadruple chain. Put that with Evelyn and you're looking at 6 chains. Depending on your Mindscapes or who you're fighting, you can get even more. So you can see just how big of a deal Lighter and Astra are to Evelyn. It's the little things too though, like triggering chains after a cancel efficiently. Quick assists are heavy attacks, so Astra helps you do double chain attacks from stun pretty easily. Without her readily available quick assists, you need to use another kind of heavy attack to trigger that second chain string, which usually takes quite a bit longer. And for characters like Kaleda, the only fast heavy attacks come from specials. So you might even be forced to use energy when you'd be better off saving it. In situations like this, you might need to alter your rotations. If you open with Evelyn's tether point chain, you need to heavy attack twice. First, just before it connects with the enemy, then again after the cancel from the chain triggered off stun. If you shift the tether point chain attack to later and open with a regular chain instead, it gives you time to swap into your stunner and land a heavy attack. It also means you only need to heavy attack once for the double chain. But it does mean you can't get as many enhanced basic cancels in. Normally, you want to enhance basic after a cancel chain. That way, you can interrupt its animation with a chain trigger from another character. But if you use the tether point chain after the cancel, you don't have the opportunity to enhance basic until all stun chains are finished. So really, even if Lighter and Astra have huge damage buffs, it's more than that. They unlock extra rotations that you just can't do without them. So keep these things in mind when playing Evelyn, as you need to tailor her rotations to her team. There are synergies that go beyond just the rotations though. Kaleda can apply extra chain attack damage to stunned enemies. But with how fast Kaleda stuns, you may not even get to use her EX twice before a stun, after factoring in Evelyn's field time. Some CN Shiyu speedruns only use Collider EX once, at the very end, else Evelyn can't build gauge fast enough. And we've gone through the difficulty she faces in triggering heavy attacks. Shingi is universally a good stun unit, with the increase to the stun damage multiplier always coming in handy. But she's very much an on-field stunner, which conflicts with Evelyn's need to be out and about to build gauge and points. Honestly, because of Evelyn's field time, you can even run Caesar in the stunner slot, and it'd be fine. But you won't benefit from her buff when swapping out of Evelyn's chain attacks. I mean, you don't even have to play Evelyn as an in-stun damage dealer. With how she's constantly dishing out damage, it's not a bad call. So don't be hesitant at just rocking double supports and trying that out instead. In many cases, it may be even better than stunner teams. There's plenty of spreadsheets you can check out that break down the damage Evelyn can do depending on her comp. I'd also encourage you to check out the many skilled creators that do some number crunching. Or better yet, use calculators to try things out yourself. I've linked them all in the description, so do check them out if you want the nitty gritty. Not just for teams, but for disk drives, WinGens, and Mindscapes too. I won't even cover stat percent differences in this video. Other creators can provide much better breakdowns. But if it's their role to educate you on the numbers, let it be my role to educate you on the practicality behind them. And that's because all calculations are actually just approximations. You frequently see disagreement on numbers. One creator may say a Mindscape is a 6.39% increase over previous. Another may say that it's actually 14.09%. Then another that it's actually 26.9%. And they're all correct, just that they factor in different circumstances. Which means that it's impossible to just take these numbers at face value if you don't understand what it actually entails. Drive disk sets in particular are the worst offenders. Evelyn only really has two options, Woodpecker Electro and Hormone Punk. I'm not recommending them because they're good, but because it's the least bad. The thing with the Woodpecker is that each buff only lasts 6 seconds. In case you don't remember, just one Evelyn chain is almost 2.5 seconds. But when you factor in swap times, animation recovery frames, and skill use, you're looking at about 9 seconds for your first 3 chains. So now you need to basic attack before triggering the next chain to maintain at the very least 1 stack up. Most rotations will have used an enhanced basic attack in the opener, which would help you maintain at the very least 1 stack. But we haven't even looked at the rest of the rotation. If you want your ultimate to have 2 stacks, you now need to use an EX special, then cancel into a basic right before it, limiting your rotation options. But if you're using the 5-frame cancel tag, the enhanced basic attack doesn't even hit the enemy, so it won't refresh your Woodpecker. Even if you think about the out of stun benefit, Evelyn's EX special has got a pretty steep cost, and you want to save energy for stun periods. And don't forget that special counters don't count as dodge counters, so no stacks from them when out of stun. So whether you're in or out of stun, you'll at best only really have 1 stack up, sometimes 0 if you don't manage your rotations properly. Hormone Punk isn't much better. Its buff is a lot stronger, and rather than only dealing with 2 or 1 or no stacks Woodpecker, you're at the very least guaranteed 10 seconds of the buff, with a 10-second cooldown. Sure, it says 10 seconds buff, 20 seconds cooldown, but the cooldown begins ticking from the swap end, so functionally 10 up, 10 down. Problem is, Evelyn's chain attack's long animation matters here too. The opener usually includes 3 chains. If that happens, your ultimate gets no buffs. Unless you're planning on opening with an ultimate, which limits the amount of chains you can get in the stun period, you're practically guaranteed to not have it up. So now you need to work your out of stun rotation so that when Evelyn swaps in for her first chain, she won't get the buff. And instead, it need to come halfway during the opener, or even later, like when using chain attack off Astra. In short, Woodpecker makes your in-stun rotation a pain. Hormone Punk makes your out-of-stun rotation a pain. Neither of them are any good, with hefty downsides. The other sets really aren't any good either. For Puffer Electro, the combat attack buff being tied to ultimate means that, realistically, you won't benefit from it at all for the majority of your rotation. And since ultimate generates a tether point, you want to save it for after you've used the tether point chain attack. Which means you're going to be missing the buff in its entirety for, in the best case scenario, 3 of your chain attacks. In the longer rotations, it'd be 5 or more. The last option, Inferno Metal, is barely even worth mentioning. With how easy it is to be at nearly 100% crit rate on Evelyn, even without a Woodpecker 2-piece set, Inferno Metal is practically guaranteed to overcap you, making it borderline worthless. It also only ever works on comps with multiple fire units, as Evelyn will struggle in generating enough anomaly by herself. I guess you can run triple 2-piece sets, but this still won't be as strong as just running Woodpecker or Hormone Punk, as the combat attack percent you get from them would be much stronger. And we haven't even touched on drive discs for her team. I will be the first to say that running Astral Voice on a stunner and Swing Jazz on Astra is the play for stun teams. But this changes if you're double chain attacking with Evelyn. Doing that means you aren't using any chain attacks with your support. Since Swing Jazz only activates on chains and ultimates of the character wearing it, that's something you want to keep in mind, as forgoing support chains means you only ever get the Swing Jazz buff from ultimates. Let's not forget Astral Voice either. You want to swap into Evelyn with a quick assist to apply the buff to her before the stun begins, which, if you're using Hormone Punk, becomes an even bigger pain to manage if you want to time the buff. But not even factoring that in, the Astral Voice buff only lasts 15 seconds. For rotations without Lighter, this isn't a problem, as the stun duration on bosses, even after factoring in the slight extensions from chain attack triggers, is around 15 seconds anyways. But with a lighter stun extension, you might want to be buff juggling halfway through, although some rotations may have timing so strict that you won't even be able to do that. And before you think that Astra's ultimate quick assist chain attacks count, that's already been debunked. You can check my Astra guide for more on that. Honestly, depending on what discs you got lying around, you might unironically get more value from running one of your stunners or supports with damage dealing sets. With how saturated damage buffs can get, and how hard some characters can hit, it's genuinely an option. All this without even touching on the engines. I'll keep this one short. Evelyn's best engine is by far her signature. That's no contest. At least 20 or 30% better than her free-to-play option, Marcado Desire. Funny enough, her second best is Zanshin Herbcase, Harumasa's signature. The crit damage main stat and the 20% crit rate make it a good enough stat stick. The best non-S rank option is Marcado Desire, although it favors running Evelyn of Lighter, as it's rather dependent on the anomaly application for the full bonus. There is always Brimstone, but I feel a bit hesitant on recommending it. It isn't bad, it's just bad to use. This is because every stack is calculated separately. We've already covered how obnoxious it is to keep Woodpecker stacks up, and that's with only single basic attacks. Since you need to ramp up Brimstone, Evelyn's ultimate will barely benefit, as all the stacks will have fallen off if you don't refresh them. It does pick itself back up on the out of stun period, so it's not all bad, but it sure is a pain to work around, and only really suits specific comps and rotations. And on the topic of rotations, you want to understand how Mindscapes affect them too. The other creators can give you a rundown of the math behind the stat gains better than I can, but when it comes to their use, I can weigh in on them a little. For M1, it can be difficult to quantify the benefit from having decibels as soon as you load in. M2 though is where things get interesting. The increased interrupt level on chain attack lets you skip certain boss phases, which can be situationally very strong in Deadly Assault. But don't underestimate the refund on the Burning Embers gauge. It has a 25-second cooldown, and with all the drive disc buffs that need management on Evelyn, I'd rather not have more things to keep track of. Still, if you can line it up just right, it's incredibly useful at unlocking new rotations. Some instant rotations are reliant on this Mindscape to work. All the other Mindscapes are just damage, except M6, which can be somewhat misleading. At first, it looks like it has some crazy numbers. 375% attack over 16 hits. That's 6,000% attack. But then you realize it only applies to basic attacks, dash attacks, and specials. And since you do need to chain attack or ultimate to gain the buff, you likely won't benefit from it at all until your first stun period if you follow standard rotations. So this Mindscape comes with strings attached, literally and figuratively. Nevertheless, it is about time for us to actually cover some rotations. Emphasis on some, as there's truly an absurd amount of factors you need to think about. Is it the first ultimate or the second? Could be neither, as you have no decibels for the upcoming stun. Does your team have decibels for something like Astra or Nicole's ultimate? Do you have full resources like gauge, points, energy, and time for the stun? Do you give up a double Evelyn chain so you can use it on your support instead, or swing jazz? Are you running Woodpecker or Hormone Punk? Are you using Brimstone? Do you need to buff juggle mid-combo for Astral Voice? Do you have Mindscapes on Evelyn or Lighter? Are you even running Lighter or Astra in your team? There are a lot of additional things to factor in too. A 7-chain combo with M0 Lighter just isn't possible without some assistance. Certain enemies have longer stun durations than others. Other enemies can be impaired, which causes their stun bars to be extended. And there are buffs like Rizonia's, which can make stuns last longer. All of these are also factors to consider, but if I start going through everything, we really will be here all day. All of this is just a tip of the iceberg, and this video has gone on long enough. So if you are interested in maybe seeing more rotations in the future, then do like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all the usual stuff. For now though, with the theory you've learned so far, you should be in a good place to adapt and figure out what best works given your circumstances. We've already seen a few rotations at the start, so let me show off a few more examples of what Evelyn can do. Evelyn seems simple at first, but the more you learn, the more you begin noticing that there's more to her than meets the eye. She's all about adapting to the moment with counters, managing countless resources and buffs, and having a unique rotation for every circumstance. I hope you've enjoyed this guide. I sure as hell enjoyed making it. If you're interested in more videos like this, then you can be sure I've got more coming. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.